Hi everyone, welcome to this month's exclusive video. So you might have seen this one before. This is the first part in my contribution to the Reanimated project for Zalinki's Music for Sad People video. It's hosted by Animated Studios and I'm really enjoying it so far. I have two parts. This first one is cut into 2 shots, which I'm going to be working on today. I have finished the first one that was on live stream and I will put the link to that in the description. So they are very basic shots, essentially a still image with a pan across. One is left to right and the other is right to left. So the way I was going to be working with this is that I would import my clips that I was going to reanimate into TVPaint, and then I would cut the clips and use them as a reference or like a little base to animate on top of. Now obviously I finished the first section, the first shot, and overall I think that took around 3 to 4 hours. So I went into the project tab in TVPaint and I duplicated what I had done already. I hid the first one just because I like to have a little save for myself. And then I went back into the first shot and hid all of the layers. I still wanted to keep them because I needed like a reference, because for this one it's in the same room and I'm going for the same type of color palette. They are going to have a little bit of difference between the two, but I want the style of this part to essentially be the same. So I started off with a gradient over the top of my base layer, and then I lowered the opacity so I could see the sketch through and roughly where everything was. And I went in with my, what I'm calling my signature purple now, and started adding details on the floorboards. I added a few more than the original because obviously you don't want an exact replica of the shot when you're in a reanimated project, because otherwise it's a bit boring. And then what I did on a new layer is I started going in with the sketch, and in the previous shot the character had clothes, so that was what I was going to do for this one. I looked at Pinterest for references and settled on a jumper with sort of like a t-shirt underneath, some trousers with rolled cuffs and some trainers. This hand was so difficult. It is a little bit like my style because I want to say sausage fingers, but it's not quite that. And usually I only do 3 fingers and a thumb, but there was something about it. I tried to change the pose of the hand and I just could not get it right. I then decided to trace over it in the sketch and I was like, that will be fine. That will be fine. I added some more details into the legs where they were bent and on the t-shirt and jumper. And then once that was done, I lowered the opacity and started doing the line work of like what essentially would be the finished look. So I'm just adding in some thicker lines with this purple brush to give the impression of shadow, which normally I would stay away from because shadows take so long when you're animating, but because this was like a still image, it was a lot faster to just do this and I wasn't going overboard with all the details and things. So it was actually really nice to finish something quite quickly. So this section I think lasted about 3 hours. I was making this. I've condensed it down to 20 minutes for you, but it didn't take that long. It was nice. I did it in an afternoon and then I took a break and then I streamed something else later. I'm not terribly confident with animating and drawing clothes because I tend to simplify them so much, but I don't think this one was too bad. The folds kind of look realistic. I do need to do some more studies. Now, once the line work was finished, I decided that I didn't like the hand. I kept looking at it and I was like, right, well, we'll change it. We'll do it in my style. And I tried multiple different ways. I looked at other references. I tried to reference my own hand, which was very difficult. I took a picture. It did not work. And so I was like, right, I'll do 3 fingers and a thumb in my usual style. And I eventually looked back at it and was like, there's something not right about this. And I compared it to the previous drawing that I'd done of the hand and it just did not look right at all. It was so much smaller. And although if you looked at it without having knowledge of like what the shot was before and what the hand position was before, it looked fine. I wasn't happy with it. I knew what the hand looked like. So I again went back to tracing over the original hand, which, yeah, it looked better, and I decided to just leave it. I'm doing this voiceover separately, and looking back over the footage, there were a couple of hands that I tried that did look fine. But sometimes when you're working on something, you just get really caught up in the drawing or stuck in your head, and you just look at it and you're like, what is this? What have I done? This does not look right. And then you come back to it like a day later and you're like, what was I even talking about? Why have I spent all this time redrawing this hand when it was totally fine? Traced over or redone in my style. It was fine. It was fine. So definitely recommend taking breaks and maybe like stepping away for a bit when you're animating and coming back to it and then looking at it with a pair of fresh eyes. I added some little cuts and scrapes to the hand, which I think made it tie in a lot better with what I'd done with the rest of the body. And then finally, you'll be pleased to know, I moved on to the blood stains. The first was traced over the original, and then like the other shot, I wanted to add in a little bit of movement. So I made 4 extra frames, and I used the stabilizer because I think just naturally I have very shaky hands, and the way I positioned it was the center circle of the cursor I traced along the outer edge of the first blood spill drawing, and this gave it such a slight wobble or like expansion that it did look very smooth. Now, smooth animation is very difficult to get, and especially, well, for me anyway, without having like a rigged program where you can interpolate the movement, where sometimes it doesn't even look natural, this helped a lot. Obviously, there was only a few frames. I didn't want the blood spill to go out too far, so I made in-betweens between each frame that I'd already done, used the onion skin to then trace over the purple section that appeared. So I'm using red and blue for my onion skin colours. So I kept the inner circle of the cursor over the top of the purple section in this. And because it was so neat, it didn't really need a line layer over the top to like clean it up. So I was really happy with this. I do tend to sort the timing later on. I tried making them all 4s, making them all 6s, and I then referred back to the previous shot to get the timing right. So I did like 12 frames for the first one, and then it was 6, and then I would extend the 4th frame for several beats and then carry on like that until we had like quite a long stretched out animation in what really is only a few frames. So I then started filling in the colour. I just did this on the actual layer because I closed it up. The outer edges didn't really need to be too neat because the blood spill was obviously underneath the character, and I was really happy with it actually. It does look very good. It does move very slowly, so in the final version, which I'll put at the end. Now after that, I started colouring in the character. I didn't really have like a set colour palette for this, and I mostly choose colours based on like how I'm feeling and how I want the shot to look. So I used the first one as a reference, and I wanted everything in this section to be like super bright, very colourful, indies, kind of street fashion-y. And now once I was finished with the base colours, I started colour picking the blood from the previous shot and added a little bit to the clothes where he was laying on the blood spill. There isn't much on, I don't think I put any blood spill on the first character in the first shot, but I felt this one was more appropriate, so like he'd been laying there longer, you know. This is very morbid, but I hope you don't mind. This is my thought process as I was going through the animation. So changing the blending modes on the blood spill on the character's clothes did sometimes look like they'd wet themselves, and that was not the vibe I was going for. So I turned off the blood spill layer on the clothes and started doing these shadows and just following the line of the creases, and where like the leg was over the top of the shoe, where the cuff of the jumper ended and sort of stretched over the t-shirt underneath. Now obviously I hadn't done any work on the actual floor layer, and in the first shot I had a lot of textures and overlays and things that would give it kind of like a dreamy vibe, which is very much in contrast to the massacre that has gone on in Zalinki's music video. So I then started turning on layers for reference from the first shot, because obviously it was still, what I had done with this is I had duplicated the shot and just tagged it onto the end so I could reference the color layers, but it didn't really look quite right. There was just something about reusing the same filters and things, and I thought that it would just be fine straight away, but obviously the textures were in different places for different reasons, and obviously highlights or shadows where like the body was would be different in this shot. So in the end I decided to just sort of loosely reference them and start adding color and texture in new layers just above and beneath like this second character. I tried using the pink overlay that I used in the first shot, but it didn't really feel right, so I switched to a yellow-ish tone and then started adding like pinks and purples, blues, and just messing about with the blending modes until I got a feel and look that I really liked. I would say this shot is my favourite, but I don't think I really can choose a favourite between the two. They're quite different even though they have the same sort of vibe. What I did really like is the shadow I added on the floor in the second one, and then I'm just going in and adjusting and making sure that when one shot cuts to the next it's not jarring for the viewer, because obviously at this point I was like, they are too different, they're going in the right direction, but I had only really used the gradient on the floor. There was no background elements to sort of break it up a bit. So what I did was make a new layer, and then I started using darker greys underneath the character and then a lighter grey to kind of add more detail to the floorboards. Now I'm really happy with how it looks, but I'm just adding in a few more textures. Of course, going through the blending modes over and over again and adding a bit more shadow around the character where he's laying on the floor. I then realised that I haven't added it to the character in the first shot, so I then go in and correct that, and then I realised the layer has been set to hold, so I remove that from the second part of the animation and I do a quick little test run through to see whether I like the look of it, and I was super happy with it. This is the final animation and how it looks. I've copied and pasted it a couple of times so you can see. I think we're done. I hope you enjoyed this chatty process walkthrough for this animation. Let me know if you want more of these. I do have more projects coming up. I really appreciate your support on here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day/night, and I'll be back with more stuff real soon. Bye.